Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of data analysis and data preparation in my video series. So, as I previously mentioned, I'll be focusing in on using R for this data manipulation and data analysis. And in this video, we'll be covering these basic three topics here. So, getting help with R, using and installing packages, and hopefully data types and objects too, depending on how long we run. So these are the main three topics here. So if you didn't catch my first video, this is basically what we covered. We didn't cover too much here, but this is basically it. So we set our working directory. We had a few comments here on what these lines of code did. And then we also create an object for our data set. And our data was super simple. It was just something I created really quickly in Notepad++ here. Just three columns, unique ID, name, occupation here that I threw in. And in this case, I actually threw in a little extra compared to our previous video. I threw in this word missing value here to show a cool feature. But yeah, so let me go ahead and jump into how to get help in R. So basically, um, so of course you could, run some type of online search for R help. So you could type in something like read CSV R, and obviously you would get some returns in your online search for the read.csv function. But there's actually some built-in help in R. So what I want to do is cover that really quickly. So if you want some help with something in R and you want to use that built-in feature, you type in question mark with before any type of text that you're about to look up, and then hopefully it'll show up over here, which I actually already have it pulled up. But this is the built-in help that R has, and it's super helpful anytime you need some help with something. Yeah, obviously. So we typed in our read.csv here, right? And we see that there's multiple ways to read in a data file. Of course, the one we used was read.csv, and it gives you, all of these different things here. But these different things here are what's known as arguments in in basic coding languages. And you can kind of think of arguments as options whenever you run a specific command. So if we're running the read.csv command, we can see that there's multiple options that you can include whenever you type this in, this read.csv. So of course the option or the argument that we gave it was the file. So you can see here that, the name of the file, which the data are to be read from, and that's basically, example data1.csv. And if we use our shortcut again here to our list.files, we can see the names of the files that we have in our directory, or what we have as our working directory. And example data1 is just simply the name of that data file that we have. So that is one of the arguments for read.csv. But yeah, but just to get back at my main point is that R has some really helpful built-in functions or built-in help for you if you need, to figure out what type of arguments that a function will take and what order they in or whatnot. So yeah, so the question mark is super helpful. There's also a double question mark, and I believe there's some slightly different functionality here, but depending on if it is a recognized function in R. But for our case, the single one does work well, so we'll just stick with that one for now. So question mark read.csv. So again, anytime you need help with a specific thing in R, you can just type in question mark, and then you'll get some help on hopefully how to use that function. So just to talk a little bit more about arguments quickly while we're here. So we didn't, as I mentioned, we didn't supply the name of the argument here, simply as example data1.csv. But we can actually do this here. We can explicitly say this is what our file argument is. It's going to be, quote, this, and that's the name of the file. So if you don't actually explicitly enter every argument, usually what will happen is behind the scenes, there will be some type of default functionality for you that it'll automatically run if you don't specifically say this is what you should use R as the argument here. But let's say, for instance, we wanted to use an argument here in a strings. As you can see, it gives you a little description here. So basically, what should R read as values that are missing or values that are NA? So in this case, let's actually see what happens if we play with this a bit. So I like to separate, I mean, depending on how many arguments I'm about to enter, but if you do have a bunch, I like to just enter so that the arguments are separated a little more cleanly. So we can actually tell it, hey R, if you see this text show up in the data, that's actually a missing value. And you can see here that I typed in missing value, not missing values, in this data set. So now that if R comes across this text, it'll know, okay, this is missing value. So what I'll do here is I'll actually create another object, or actually haven't created the first one. Let's backtrack here and just create that first one quickly. Okay, good. So our normal data here, right? Okay, but let's say we want to create another object, creates data object with missing value, and we'll name it example data 2, and then we'll put na.strings is going to be missing value, and then hopefully this works, and then we'll see. Boom. We have a new object here, example data 2. Now that you see that we have a missing value here, read in by R, which is represented by this gray NA. And yeah, so if we read in that first value, we actually see here a missing value is an actual value or text in that column, but we use the argument function of na.strings. Whenever you see this, hey, this is going to be a missing value. So if we look at our second object here that we created, we do in fact see that this is a missing value. So just again, a quick recap. So the arguments can be explicitly noted or named. I would actually highly encourage you to do this when you are entering your arguments, is to specifically say what this type of argument is. And this is mainly so that you can come back and read it and you know what you're referring to. So one thing that we did up here when we first read in this file is we didn't specify the argument. So we just did this number here, right? And it still works because that's the default whenever you enter in a function like this is that it goes through the order that the arguments are listed here. So let's say if we wanted to indicate whether we have a header argument here, so we can just read this, a logical value contains the names of the variables. So basically, do you have a row that has the names of your columns? So if we actually didn't specify the argument for that, we would just say something like true. This would still work, hopefully. Yes. So you can see here that we have our data read in, but as I mentioned, having the name of the argument before it really helps you interpret it and helps others interpret what's happening too. So yeah, so just that's kind of a quick summary of arguments when you use a function and then the help feature that you can use to kind of dig into what those possible options or arguments are. And I would encourage you just to kind of explore what these arguments are on your own for basically anything, because there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do in here. So yeah, so that is a quick intro into getting help and some of the arguments in functions. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is using packages in R or using libraries. So if you did watch that first video that I created, you'll notice that I spent a brief amount of time talking about this little window pane here, which is packages. And the way to think about packages is basically someone out in the community, the open source community, created some code that has been submitted to kind of the central database, and now everyone can easily access them. So you can see that we have a lot of different packages here already preloaded. So we have the boot here, we've got something called graphics, and we've got something called matrix, and so on and so forth. But basically, the cool thing is that we don't have to create everything from scratch when we're coding. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, as I say. So if someone's out there has likely already done it for some type of data analysis or data prep need that you probably that you'll need when you're working with data. But if you want to uh, install a library, you could use this interface here. So let's say, for instance, there's actually a package that I like called Psych. And if you type it in, Psych, you can see here that it'll look for it for you in this little button here, and then we can install it. I actually already have it. Um, I know I actually don't because this is a new install. So let's go ahead and install Psych here. And you'll see that it will go ahead and install it for you. I've had some issues downloading packages with certain antiviruses enabled. So if you do have issues installing a package, I would try to disable that antivirus, whatever you have, because it can cause some issues. At least disable it momentarily while you install a package. And then, of course, just re-enable it once you have it. But yeah, so we used basically install here, and you can search for any type of package that you need, and it'll install it for you. Um, and then, uh, but if you were to actually type in that um, that code that we ran from clicking on this install, it is actually running this line here, this install packages. So that could go up here, and that would run basically the same thing. So that's installed into your computer now, but if you actually want to utilize the functions that are included in Psych package, what you need to do is you need to actually library it first. And that basically tells R, hey, use that file that includes this Psych package in our data now. So once you do install it, you have to library it to actually utilize it. And the common thing to do when you are librarying a package is to actually put it at the top. That is kind of the norm for installing packages or librarying packages is to put it at the top. So let's go ahead and we'll just run this line of code. Yeah, and now we see that we do now have everything available to us in Psych. So if you actually go back to what we talked about earlier, if you want to look at what does actually Psych do, let's look it up. So we can see a description here that the authors wrote for us that describe the package and the various functions that are included in the Psych package. So you can read, file, describe, describe by, all of this cool stuff. So again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you don't, if you don't need to. Of course, if there's something out there that hasn't been made yet, or if there's some, specific function or task that you need to accomplish, you can write it yourself, obviously. But good chance is that there's a good chance that someone else out there probably created something similar for what you need. Um, but yeah, so this is the Psych package, and it includes a lot of cool stuff for you. So let's go ahead and just use this one, the describe function here on our data set. And it's actually a cool way just to kind of get some quick descriptive information. So what we'll do is we will type in, and then we like that RStudio tries to autocomplete things for you. And then boom, so you can see here that now we have some quick descriptives, quick description of our data set that came from our library. So of course we could write all the code that does this for us, and that would take some time, but look, it's already out there, and it's been vetted. So that's actually a thing too about these packages, that typically these packages are run and they're vetted, and they're checked for errors, and they're also created to be fast. They're optimized for efficiency, so to speak. So that's the cool thing about these packages too, is that they're kind of made for speed, and they've been kind of vetted. So yeah, so that is kind of the quick thing about packages. They're basically some code that other people wrote out there for you in the open source community, and they've shared it for us all to enjoy. And if we want to install it, we could go to our packages, install, or we could simply type in install packages like that, and hopefully it'll try to install it for us. And then if we want to actually utilize it, we type in library and then the name of the package, and that will give us all of the cool features that are included in that library. I do want to say that if you actually try to let's say for instance we didn't library psych, so let's try to actually unlibrary it, detach it. So that's actually a cool thing you can do here within the user interfaces: unlibrary or detach a package. Let's see what happens if we do this. Right, so you see that now it's actually giving us issues if we're trying to get help with psych if we don't actually have it libraried. But if you do library it, and then you run it again, that's not here. Now you see that we get the help. So just a quick note, if you want to get the in-help feature in R for a package, you need to library it first typically, and then you'll see the in documentation that's included for the package. Okay, so that is, I think that's going to do it for this session. I don't want to make them too long. So we've covered some cool stuff again, hopefully. So we learned how to get help with R, specifically within the built-in features, and then we've also learned about how to use and install packages. And then we also talked about arguments and functions, and kind of a good practice is to actually type out the name of the argument you're giving before you actually supply it. And then, of course, we talked about using and installing packages. But the next lesson, I will cover some data stuff, so specifically data and object types, and probably a few other things too. So thanks again for tuning in to this second video, and hope to see you in the next one.